Hey guys, it's Linda Winter of Winter Design. So I have another great project for you and I cannot wait to see what you guys do with this. This has been a request for a while and I really was stumped on how to create this. What is this? A cozy. Now I make microwave bowl cozies for ice cream and for your cereal and for your hot foods, and I make a cozy for your coffee. We'll look at those in a second, but this is specifically for ice cream that comes in a pint. So this little cozy, this guy here, this nestles inside, and now when you're holding the ice cream, it's not going to get warm really fast, melting because of the heat of your hands. The ice cream is going to stay colder longer and your hands aren't going to get cold from the ice cream. Plus, if it's really hot, all those drips that you get from this, they're going to go right in here. And what's great about this is, of course, it's washable. So if you do get ice cream on here, no big deal. I've made the cozy so that it holds not only ice cream, but you can also put a candle inside one of these little tins. And imagine 4th of July or any holiday or just whatever, you've got a candle in here and now you've got a cute little tea light kind of a cozy. But it also does, this is cold, it also does hot stuff. So if you've got like this is a roasted chicken noodle soup, this holds that as well. And the cool thing is, this and this, they're not the same size, but it holds this too. Stir fry, this is a cup of noodles, here's some ramen noodles, here's one of these cup of lunch, instant lunch things, they all fit in there. And then the expensive gelatos, they fit in there as well. So it's kind of multi-use. So the template looks like this. This guy here, and it has my holes. The holes that I make that go in my microwave bowl cozies. Let me get some of these things out of the way, and I just want to kind of refresh your memory on what I have. I have 8 microwave bowl cozies that have the holes. These guys are curved. The curved, when you hold a bowl of soup, a bowl of cereal, a bowl of ice cream, this gives you a nice curved kind of a finish here. But this is a lot of ice cream, and if you don't want to wait, if you just want to go right to the pint, then this cozy really comes in handy. This is the 10.5-inch microwave bowl cozy that I have, and again, the holes there, you'll see them in action. Those are for our darts, but I also make a square one, and the square one, you can see this looks a little bit different. Boy, let's see, I'm trying to make it so you guys can see. Maybe that's a little bit better. But the square just gives you a little bit more room. If you're making these and selling these, I highly recommend making both. Make them out of coordinating fabric. Both of these have the same fabric on the back, but coordinating fabric's on the front, so it encourages people to buy both. And because I have larger sizes here, you can do plate cozies too. That's kind of cool. The plate cozies, when we do those, I know it's hard to see, but there is a little tiny dart right here. This dart that's there allows me to put a plate in there. There's just a little bit of a curve that we're getting, so this is a plate cozy as well. So I have 6.5, 7.5, 8.5, 9.5, 10, 10.5, 12.5, 15. Those are in the rounded. I mentioned the square. I have the 10.5-inch in square, and brand new is the 12.5-inch in square. This is a plate cozy as well. So you can make these with the squared edges. But that's not what we're talking about today. I wanted you to see those because none of those really are meant to hold something like this. I could change the darts a lot and make this so that it was much tighter, but it still wouldn't really fit. So I have a template that's made specifically for that. So I also make a coffee cozy, and I really thought along the way when people were asking for this, maybe the coffee cozy would work. This is what the cozy looks like. It's perfect for a cup of coffee, for a drink, whatever it is that has a nice slant to it. This guy here comes from this template here. This template has a nice curve to it so that it fits perfectly. I've got a fussy cut frame, so if you had frogs, dogs, bears, toads, whatever, but like let's, you know, thanks a latte or something like that, you could get it fussy cutted so that it was perfect. But if we look at this around the ice cream, this really doesn't fit. You can see how there's a big gap in there. And with that gap, you're going to end up having this part here. It's paper. It's going to start to fall apart, and it's just not going to have anything on the bottom either, so it's going to start to drip, and you might have a big mess unless you're eating that ice cream really, really fast. So the coffee cozy template that I have, the microwave bowl cozy templates that I have, they're not going to work for your pint of ice cream for all of these other things. So let's take a look at the template that I came up with. Like I said, I think you guys are going to have a whole lot of fun whipping these up. This will be a really cool gift to give to your friends, and you're going to have a whole lot of fun with your fabric choices, because are we doing cold stuff? Are we doing hot stuff? I'm making one with fabric that has for hot stuff right now. You'll see this one. This is the one I'm going to be sewing with. So if you're doing the tortilla soup or anything like that, or you have somebody that loves those ramen noodles, you can use different fabrics. I've got Chinese fabric over there. I have coffee fabric, because you may want to make this a little bit shorter, a little bit taller and a little bit narrower for those small cups of coffee that you get at one of the gas stations. Okay, so what are we doing? We're going to be cutting along the edges of the template. We're going to be cutting inside. Just like my storage pods, just like Martelli's Tasket baskets, we have these cut lines. This is the first time we've used the cut line on something like this that doesn't have a straight edge, so I'm really excited that it worked. This is what I started out with, and this is what I gave to Shane, who makes the templates, and he got it done for me so that I could show you. So we have the template. The template has holes. The holes are going to give us our stitch lines. When we stitch here to here, here to here, that basically is going to give me an X on this. So the stitch lines are nice. You do not have to do that, but I like to do it because it's going to give you stitch lines here all the way across, all the way across. So those stitch lines just hold it together a little bit more if you do end up throwing this in the washer and dryer. Because of those holes, we need a pencil or a Bic pen. I do not want a clicker pen like this. These clicker pens, they don't really go deep enough in there, so that hole isn't big enough, and I don't want to make the hole too big, because then the mark that you put won't really be appropriate. So pencils or the Bic pens that you can just put right inside of there. The batting that I have, I highly recommend Wrap and Zap from Pellon. I also love, love, love Winline Textiles. Now they are out west, they're hard to get, but you can go to their website, winlinetextiles.com. They have amazing batting, 100% cotton batting. 100% cotton batting, no scrim. The scrim is the stuff that will catch on fire if you end up putting, not the ice cream, but if you end up putting something like this in the microwave, this batting has to be 100% cotton, no scrim. Scrim has a glue to it, and that glue will end up causing you problems at some point. So this batting, this fabric, and the thread you're going to be using, if you're going to put this in the microwave at all, 100% cotton. So the thread also is what you need to be thinking about, 100% cotton. Okay, so when we go to cut, and we're going to use the Martelli rotary cutter. Of course, I'm left-handed. You have the right-handed rotary cutter if you want that as well. You need a pencil or a pen. I love using one of these hams, something like this. They're making all different sizes and shapes, but when you go to press this, pressing will make a big difference. Do you see how this here, it's basically the same size on both ends. They make these bigger. You can make your own too, but this really helps with pressing. Tweezers, and then of course we're going to need these little guys, the precision scissors that Martelli makes. I love these. Why? When we go to cut inside of here, we've made the cuts almost perfect, almost, because there's going to be 1 or 2 hairs that we'll have to snip. I'd rather you have a little bit less than a little bit more. I don't want to interfere with the seam allowance. All right, what are we going to do? We're going to roll, and I'm going to cut. Now when I get to this edge, I don't want to go inside here. I'm just going to go right along and continue. Do you see how I'm basically hitting this? What I want to do is then angle it. I want to make sure when I cut this part here that I haven't left any batting. I'm going to do the next side, and I'm going to do it wrong so you can see what I mean by that. When I go to here, can you see there's a little bit of batting there? I do not want that batting there. The whole point of the template is accuracy. We have no slip material on the back side, so when I cut, I want to make sure that I'm getting exactly what that template is. The template was designed on a laser machine. Laser means accurate. If you need to stop and reposition here, go ahead and do it. Whatever way works best for you. We're just cutting the sides first. When I get to here, I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of all of this stuff, and I think I'd already done that side. Now we're going to cut inside. So when we cut inside, this hand is not in the way. This is where I'm cutting, and that cut mark that's there, I want to push and go in. I'm going to go in, not on top of, and slice my finger open. There's no reason for us to get our fingers with stitches or any trips to the emergency room. So make sure your hand is out of the way. A little bit of pressure here though as I go to cut. I'm in that cut. You can see I'm pushing hard. I want you all to see I'm inside that cut. Then I have to pull back out. It's in there tight. I'm going to turn that template and I cut inside that cut. Let me show you what happens. This comes off, and there's just a hair or two, a thread or two, and that's where we're going to later on use these scissors to cut that off. I turn my template and I'm going to cut the next side and the next side. Again, always thinking about my hand and making sure my hand is in a safe position because I do not want any trips to the emergency room. I'm removing just the batting because all the other pieces, the pieces down below, they are tied to that by just a thread or two. All right, now we're going to take our pencil and I'm going to do a little mark. Now you can do the mark any way you like. All we need is just a mark for us to be able to use that as our X stitch lines. Again, you can choose to stitch on these if you want. You don't have to. But I do think if you end up throwing this in the washer and dryer, that's going to come in handy. Okay, now we're going to lift up the template and we want to get rid of those excess pieces. These little guys here. You can see there's not that much fabric that's left. So I just want to go in with my scissors and I'm just going to snip. And I don't care if I'm exactly, you notice I'm just kind of snipping these off because that's part of my seam allowance. We do two of these, one on the front, one on the back. And what we're ready to do now with this is mark those lines. We need a big template. I'm going to grab, because I have it, I'm going to grab my 12.5. Any of our rulers that are long enough to be able to line up. So we're going to line up from the point to the dot, to the dot, to the dot, to the dot, to the point. And when we get that, we're going to take the pencil, and you don't have to do this, but it does help. If you're good at visualizing all of that, terrific. But if you're not, then doing this little line that I have here will make all the difference. So, and you can see my pencil mark, I've got to press a little bit harder to be able to see. An ink pen works fine too. We don't want to use a Sharpie. We don't want to use anything that might end up causing problems if we put this in the microwave. And you can see here when I moved it, it moved a little bit, so you all decide if you want to do that or not. This morning, the pencil that I used worked great. So you'll have to play around with pencils to see if you can see that. And when I've actually made my microwave bowl cozies, I don't even do this line. The line I can kind of visualize from dot to dot to dot. Okay, so we've got this one done, this one here. This is going to be my other piece that I have, and I have not marked these. So I'm just going to start stitching from the point through those dots, from the point through those dots. So we're going to head over to the sewing machine. When I get there, I'm going to need my scissors, and I really like our tweezers. Any of the Martelli tweezers are great to help us when we get to the sewing machine. So we'll go sit down and stitch these guys up. All right, so we're ready to put our two pieces together. So we're going to stitch along this X mark. And again, if you want a chain piece, that'll make it a little bit faster and easier. If you're going to make a bunch of these, that chain piecing will make it a whole lot faster, a whole lot easier. You can just do one after another, assembly line. We're going to do the other side. And some machines like to kind of bunch up on that fabric, so we'll get that going a little bit further. Back tacking is not critical because that's going to be in your seam allowance. And sometimes the batting, depending on your machine, won't feed as easily, as consistently. So if you need to stop or start a 1/4 of an inch in from the edge, just make sure that you back tacked. All right, now we're ready to start joining our sides. You can use pins, you can use clips if you want to, but we've only got this and this one to do on this one, and this one to do on that, and then we'll switch it around. So I don't use pins. What you want to decide is, do you want to start from the top or start from the bottom? If your machine doesn't like working with batting and it kind of fights, then start at the top. That'll allow you to stitch a little bit more consistently. And this right here is the part that matters when you're joining. If your machine doesn't have any problem, then you can start at the bottom if you like. We're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. 1/4 inch seam allowance, or a little bit bigger if you want. And back tacking here will make a difference, because one of these is where we're going to be turning, and we don't want that to unstitch. We're going to switch over to the other side. So what you want to do on each side is feel right inside on the bottom. This is the bottom area. What we don't want is when we stitch this side to have a little pleat or a pucker down in there. It's not going to be a huge difference, but you know, those little things make a difference. Again, back tack here. And back tack here as well. I'm going to switch over to the next one, do the same thing, because we're going to turn our fabric in the opposite direction to do those other sides. Okay, so right here, I could feel when I folded those that I had a little bit of a crease here. So I just am running my finger inside here to get that crease out of there. I don't want, especially on a white fabric, for that pucker to be there. I'm going to start at the bottom just to make sure that we don't have that crease, and we'll back tack. And we'll go over to the other side and do the same thing. And again, I'm just feeling right inside here, just pulling that fabric. And probably because I've had all that come together where those plus signs are, if you don't use a walking foot, sometimes you get a little bit of a pucker. You don't need a walking foot on this project, but anytime you're working with batting and any other kind of fabric, it's nice to have a walking foot. So if you have one and it's already on your machine, then go ahead and by all means use it. Again, I'm feeling right inside for that pucker. What we've done is we've swapped. So let me show you on this one. I've opened this up and I'm going to join those next two sides together. So we're making that cup that this is going to be holding, our fabric cup, our fabric cozy. So you can see how I've joined that together. And again, we're going to feel inside here. And I don't feel any puckers there, so we're good. We're going to go over and do the other side. And again, feel inside for the puckers. And you notice I'm sewing from the bottom up. Again, you make the decision whether you like to start at the top or at the bottom. All right, let's take a look at what this one looks like before we sew the other one. I'm going to flip this out. I've used a white thread because that's what this machine has, but this is where you really do want to use a matching thread. Unless you're going for a heavier weight thread and you want a decorative kind of a finish, that would give a really nice look too. All right, so look at our little cozy. Isn't that cute? Now, if this is your first one, pull over your ice cream pint or your, this is coffee fabric. You notice I swapped out. I'll show you in a few minutes why I swapped out. But if you're going to do a coffee cup, or if you're going to do the ice cream, if you're going to do the ramen noodles or whatever, that's where you want to grab it and just kind of test it out so you can see how it looks. I'm going to put this one aside. We're going to go do the second half of our project. Same thing. We have 2 more seams to finish here before we sew them all together. going over to the other side and we're going to feel, and I didn't feel on that side, so I may have a pucker there. We'll find out. All right, I'm just going to kind of pull, and that fabric does have a little pucker inside of there, so I'm just going to kind of work through it and see if I can get that out. All right, next thing we want to do is trim off all of this bulk. We've got a whole lot of bulk in here, and so we can, with a bigger pair of scissors, go in and trim. We're going to trim a couple different places, but right now I'm just working on the seam allowance here that I have. I gave you a bigger seam allowance option with the template because I wanted you to be able to have something for that gelato. The gelato is a little bit bigger than your regular ice cream pint. Your coffees might be a little bit bigger, or you can do a narrower seam allowance too. That's a great thing about templates like this. You can kind of play around with it. All right, so you can see I've trimmed a lot of that bulk off. I want to go in now with a smaller pair of scissors, and we're going to trim at each of those points, a lot of that excess near the points. I don't want any of this batting. That's the batting that we're trimming right now, not the cotton fabric. I don't want any of that excess batting in there. That's going to be our seam allowance. So I'm just kind of separating it from the cotton fabric. I don't want to cut that cotton fabric because that's going to weaken that seam. And I've already got a little teeny tiny seam allowance already here. And we're just trying to get some of that bulk out. When we do the top stitching, all of that on a smaller machine, a lower end machine, will definitely be fighting with you. So we want to just trim out as much of the batting as we can, but again, leave that seam intact. When this goes in the washer and dryer, which it invariably will, because you're going to spill something on it, we don't want this to all fall apart because we've cut off so much. I'm going to do the same thing on the other piece. And then we're going to put the two together and see how they look. You can use the precision scissors for this, but I like a bigger pair of scissors just because I can cut off, whack off a lot at the same time. And then we'll go back in and kind of fine tune with the precision scissors. Batting is going to end up on your fabric. So if you've got one of those little rollers or you've got a roll of tape, any of that will work out well, because when you turn this, especially with the darker fabrics that I have on this one and on the other one that I did, the darker fabric is going to show the pieces of batting, and that batting is going to want to cling to everything. And, you know, if we're making these and we're taking the time, we want them to look nice. All right, so I'm trimming out some of that bulk. We've got some there, a little bit left here. All right, I think I've got all of those corners there. Get rid of this stuff. All right, so we're going to turn one right sides out. And when we sew these together, we're going to be doing right sides together like any other project that you work on. And notice there where this back tacked a little bit, pulling that fabric some, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those threads. It's pulling my batting down, so I definitely don't want that to interfere with that corner. Again, some machines handle batting when you back tack a little bit better than others. I'm going to grab our tweezers because they'll let me get in and pick out those threads a little bit more. I just want this to be laying nice and flat. And again, you can see the white thread here, a brown thread, a black thread would certainly look better. But that's what we had on the machine here, so that's what I'm using. And I'm just going to pick out a few of those stitches because that's one of those things that'll show at the point. And I don't need that, so it'll just take a second to pop those out. I know y'all have never done anything like that before, right? Okay, so that's my thread from the other side. So let's go ahead and cut that. All right, same thing on all those other corners. If you had the same thing happen, see how this is eating up here? Just pull those threads out if you need to. But we're going to go ahead and tuck right sides in together. But before we do that, I want to put this inside just so, oops, put this inside so you can see what it's going to look like. All right, so I've got coffee bean fabric here, and I've got the kitchen hot sauce, salsa, those kinds of things. They don't really go together, but this is reversible. So if you're giving somebody a cup of coffee, then you're going to flip it out and make it reversible with the coffee beans on the outside. I'm just tucking in, and just so you can see, here's the inside, here's the outside. How cute is that going to be? Now what we want to do is go ahead, we're going to be putting right sides together, so we'll put them in like this. You can pin or you can clip. Either way you go, we're going to be looking at this inside piece first. That's kind of where I'm lining everything up, and you'll take the time to just kind of maneuver all of that around. Can you see how that corner right here has been turned in? So I want to make sure that we're going to clip that thread so we've got a nice point there. And again, back tacking sometimes does you more, I don't know, gives you more extra work than it's worth, because again, we're going to be stitching those sides together, so it's going to probably take care of it for you. We do want to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance on this, a scant 1/4 inch. We're not going to, see how right here my fabric doesn't line up? I've got some batting showing. I do not want that showing and not getting cut or getting caught when I go to turn. So a 1/4 inch seam allowance at least is what you're going to want to use. So we're going to clip or pin, again, totally up to you. And we're looking at the corners first, so I'm just kind of manipulating and getting each side. Take the time here. If you have the ability to take your arm off of your sewing machine, terrific. If not, we can maneuver this underneath your needle and just take your time and sew, removing those clips. If you have to flip from the outside to the inside to be able to sew, that's okay too. We're just going to clip at each of these sides, and then we want to leave one side open. I'll show you that when we get around to it, because we're going to be turning on one side. The turning of this project, because it's so small, it's kind of like birthing a baby. I don't know if you've heard that expression. If you're a sewer, you probably have heard that expression, and you probably know all about birthing a baby. It's going to be fairly tight. So what we want to do is make sure that our one area that we have is fairly flat and straight and even. So right in here, you can see, let's find another one. Right in here I'm going to use. I'm just kind of eyeballing and looking to see where it is that I want to turn. So I'm going to leave this area open for me to turn here. It's not a big area, so we'll take our time when we go to turn. We're going to be stitching this side down, so I'm going to get rid of that clip, and we'll go to the sewing machine. We're starting on this side. This is up. You can do that, but you can turn it this way too. It's totally up to you as to what feels more comfortable. If you feel like you're not getting what you want, then stop, lock those stitches in, and then turn it to the other side and maneuver your fabric and go from the other side. Because we're going to be turning here, I want to make sure that I back stitch off of this, but not have any bulk here, and then stitch back on. So we don't want any of that batting flipping around. I'm going to stitch to the corner. When I get to that corner, we're going to put our needle down. And if you have a knee lift on your machine, terrific. If not, go ahead and lift up and pivot. We're going to get rid of that next clip and just kind of lay everything flat. And we'll stitch all the way off here. You can pivot here if you want to. I like to just stitch off and then reposition that needle. It's totally up to you. We're going to be cutting off that bulk at the corner anyway, at that point, I should say. So it's not a big deal. We're getting to the corner. We're going to leave our needle down. And one more stitch. We'll lift up, pivot. Just finagle that fabric, get it all flat. And again, I'm going to stitch off, but it's totally up to you. If you're good at guesstimating from the edge of your foot, then you can go ahead and leave that needle down and then pivot. Because this is a machine that I don't use very often, I still, you know, it's one of those things. I just go ahead and stitch off. When I get to the corner, I am going to leave that needle down, lift up, pivot again, And I want to make sure that batting is not puckered there. We're going to just keep it all nice and flat. Get rid of that clip. All right, I've got one more side to do before we're going to be coming to the part that we're going to close. When I get to here, right about there, I'm just going to back stitch, because that's where we're going to be turning. So cut our threads, and now we're going to trim. We've got a lot of trimming we want to do. So we're going to cut off each of those tips without getting close to our seams. And this right here, this is where I've got that area open, so we're going to go in and just trim a little bit here. All right, so we've cut off those corners. Now I'm going to go in with our snippets or the precision scissors, either one, and we're going to snip and snip and snip. And what I'm doing is just cutting little pieces, but then I'm going to go in. I'm going to pull this apart, and I'm going to cut out some of that bulk in the middle there, right at that seam. So I'm just kind of holding that down, holding that back, and then I'm cutting off. See what I've done? I've basically cut out like a little box, the bottom of a box. That way it's going to turn a little bit more easily. We've got a lot of batting here. You could trim that batting if you wanted to in those seam allowances, because we've got a top stitch that we're going to be doing. It's up to you if you want to trim all of that out. I'm just cutting a lot of that bulk out. I went fairly close to those stitches, so just to be sure, I'm going to go back and stitch. Better to be safe than sorry. I've got two of my points, my inside points, I should say, my where this all pops inside cut. We're going to trim this guy up a little bit. And then over here, this is where I started. I definitely want to get rid of all the bulk here. And not only do I want to get rid of the bulk, but I also here, right inside of here, I'm going to cut off, just like we did for the other piece, I'm going to go ahead and cut off some of that excess batting. I don't want any of that in the way when I'm turning. The other thing I'm going to do too is right in here in this area that's open, I'm going to go in and trim the batting. And this is just kind of a precaution. Not a precaution, it's just, it makes it easier. So I'm going to go ahead and trim some of this out. When I go to top stitch that closed, I don't want any of the bulk of the batting out. So you can see I took out a good little chunk there. I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit more of that out too, because again, when I'm top stitching this, that makes it harder to top stitch. I hate having to top stitch an area that's closed, you know, that I need to close. It's just one of those things. I know you can do hand needle, just don't enjoy it. I've got nerve damage. I don't have fine motor control. All this, even this kind of stuff, is harder for my hands to do. You know, when you've got nerve damage, you've got arthritis, bursitis, whatever it is that all of you all are probably dealing with like me, it's harder to do those hand pieces, the fine motor stuff. So anything you can do that makes it a little bit easier. Okay, so you can see I've trimmed out that, I've trimmed out that. All right, what are we going to do? This is the birth and the baby. So you could, if you wanted to, trim out. Let me trim out a little bit more. I've got a little bit more here. We'll trim off some of that. We'll trim off some of that. You could trim a little bit more. You could certainly go in and trim out the excess batting in those seam allowances. Totally up to you. I'm just going to cut all that excess out. But I'm cutting also the cotton fabric. So you could trim out just the batting if you wanted to. Okay, now birth and the baby. All right, let's get rid of all this stuff. We're going to go inside these two pieces. I'm going to grab, and y'all have been there, done that. We're going to push, push, push. Sometimes you'll get to a point where you just don't think it's going to work, and you're pushing and pushing and pushing. You need to reposition. Reposition your hands. I've got my thumb in there. I'm kind of pushing. You just take your time. pushing out. If you're going to make a bunch of these, this is the kind of thing you do in front of the TV. So you've got 20 of these that you've made, and they're all ready to be turned. And then you have a little pressing station set up. And while you're watching TV, you can get all of this kind of detail stuff done. Okay, so you get the idea of what I'm doing. We're going to push, 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 pull, pull, pull. Zeke and I talked about, do I actually do this on camera? And I had said, no, I'll show you the other one that I got right to this point. But I'm going to do this anyway because I want you to see the process. And again, this is like watching paint dry. Y'all have been there, done that. I know y'all know how to do this, but I want you to see what happens when we get this, because it's going to be ugly. Just like the microwave bowl cozies, this is going to be ugly at the beginning, and you're going to think, I don't like this project. It's going to turn into pretty. You just have to give it some time. When we get to where we can start pulling, you can see why the back stitching is so important, because I'm pulling here. So those seams where I'm pulling this out, that little opening, that back stitching is really important. But you can see this process. Once you get there, it really does start to come together. Use a chopstick, use a poker tool, use whatever it is that you have at hand. I'm going to use scissors. Right now I'm using my thumb, just pushing out. I've got those 3 points. The 4th point is where we're going to be closing. So you can see I'm using my thumb first. And I'm pushing out and I'm pushing out. Now I'm going to grab scissors that are larger and that are sharp but not too sharp to poke out. I'm poking the corners. Okay, and I just want to get that shape where I've got a nice finished kind of a point. It's not going to be perfect because we've got all that excess batting. Even though we did a whole lot of trimming, we still are not going to have a perfect point. So I've done 1, 2, I need to go get my 3rd one, and then we're going to start finagling. There it is. We're going to start finagling the whole project. Okay. So we've got our points pretty good. Now I'm going to start pushing and pushing the bottom where we are. We want to make sure to push those out as well. All of this fine tuning, all of this creating, all of this manipulating, all of this is going to make it look really nice. If you don't take the time to do this, you're going to have a cozy that people will say, oh, well, that's sweet. No, I'm not interested in buying it, or no, thank you, you should keep it yourself. The pressing, the time that you take here will make all the difference. I'm pushing at the seams, pulling at the seams. I want to have those open all the way. In a minute, I'm going to grab that tailor's tool that I have, and I'm going to show you how well that works. But right now, I'm just manipulating. If you've got threads, you're going to, of course, take the time to cut those threads. I want to get in and give a little bit more of a poke to this, and then we'll grab the tailor's ham. All right. Now I've got the chili cowboy outside, and you can see a directional fabric is going to read correctly in some areas and not in the others. You decide if that's okay or not okay. If you don't like that, don't use a directional fabric, because this is the kind of project that will make a difference. Okay, so I'm using this guy here, and I'm just going to press. And we're just going to kind of give a good press on here. And I like the smaller irons because you can really get right on top of here. And again, I would take the time to poke that corner out even a little bit better. You get the idea of what we're doing. We're just trying to make this look pretty. I'm choosing this as the outside. You can choose the coffee beans as the outside. Again, you can make it reversible. It's up to you how you want to have this done. When we get to the area that needs to be sewn, we're not going to do any pressing on that here. We're going to do all of that at the, I shouldn't say we're not going to do any pressing. We're not going to do any folding under. We're going to do that at the sewing machine, but you get the idea. And then right on the bottom too, we'll give that a little bit of a press. Before I get to the sewing machine and finish that up though, I want to show you what this is going to end up looking like. All right. So this guy here, I'd spend a little bit more time pressing it, but you get the idea. How cute is that? Again, we've got the coffee fabric on the inside. I've got threads that I would take the time to trim, but you get the idea. I'm going to poke out. You can also use tweezers to pull out. If you all have made any dolls, and you probably know about the hemostats that are really great to grab your fabric and pull out. And this would be where a chopstick or a knitting needle would really work well as well for getting that corner. All right, so what I want to do is pull this one over and talk about why we ended up with coffee beans. When I started sewing the one that I showed you earlier, this guy here, I totally forgot to stitch along those X marks. Totally forgot. I've made a bunch, but not enough that it's like automatic. So I want you to see what this looks like. You don't have to have the stitch marks here that go all the way around, that X. This is what you'll end up getting. So it looks just fine. The reason why I like to do the X marks though is if this does go in the washer and dryer, the batting might get a little bumpy, a little bit lumpy. So the X marks will help with that, but it's not required. If we look at these two here, you can see they both look great. All right, they both are going to do the job. So this guy here gives you that outside. Look how cool that is. And then this guy here gives you that outside. And again, they're both reversible. Okay, so let's talk about closing this up and doing our top stitching. All right, so we trimmed out all that excess batting, so I don't have to worry too much about that. I'm going to start before. This is the side before this. So I'm going to start stitching right inside of here, top stitching inside of here. And what I want to do is just kind of, again, finagle that so that that seam really is open. We're going to move our needle way, way over because I want to make sure that I'm right along the edge for top stitching. And let's bring that needle up. All right, and we're going to stitch about halfway, and then we're going to position this fabric. And boy, I'm right there on the edge with this. I moved the needle a little bit further than I wanted, but that's okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and stitch a little bit. And then I'm going to stop, and I want to lift up the presser foot. The needle is still down, and I'm just going to kind of finagle this fabric and finagle it and finagle it. If you want to pin, go ahead and pin. This is the stuff I just hate doing. What I'm going to end up doing is using our tweezers, our snippets, our precision scissors, something, and just folding that fabric back in. And you'll work at this. They make glue, but I'm going to take this out so y'all can see what I'm doing. They make glue that you can use at the sewing machine, but I do not want you using any of that glue. Because if you use glue and you throw this in the microwave, that glue might create a problem. All right, so you can see what I'm doing here. I'm just folding that inside here and folding that inside here. You can usually, by pulling this straight, get that to kind of lay down in place. And I'm going to put a clip on there. I'm going to put a clip on here, and we'll go back to the sewing machine. And you all probably have a bunch of different ways that you do this that work well for you. Do whatever works well for you. All right. So we're going to go back to where we left off. Put that needle down. And again, the tweezers, the precision scissors, whatever it is, if you want to use those to kind of push that fabric in place, it's up to you. I'm going to lift and pivot, and I want to go one more stitch. All right, lift and pivot, and now we're going to get rid of the one clip. I'm going to pull that down a little bit and just hold that. And if you have a hard time with this going and sewing, that's where you can use the precision scissors or the tweezers to kind of push that fabric along. The machine is grabbing it here, okay, so I don't really need to. All right, I've removed the clips. I'm going to hold all of that in place. I'm going to grab this other point towards me, and we're going to stitch to that corner. You've got bulk in that corner, even though we did a lot of trimming. So you want to take your time at that bulk. And if you find that you need to, like this machine is saying, hey, that's a whole lot, you know, then take your time and use that hand wheel to crank down and walk that needle through. When I get close to the corner, I'm going to grab that other side and just hold that straight so we can kind of make sure those seams are up and open. And by open, I mean, you know, nice and tight so that I don't have any folds. All right, and here it is fighting a little bit. So I'm pushing with the precision tweezers. These guys here, our tweezers are so sharp that lets me put that push that fabric in. So I'm not having to get that nice big, you know, bunch up with the bobbin thread. All right, take our time when we get to the corner. Inside, lift up that presser foot a little bit and hold, and you get the idea. We're just going to finish up this whole thing, stitching around, top stitching. And again, a matching thread for your bobbin would be a better thing to use than white, but you'll get the idea. All right, and right here again, I've got a lot of bulk, so we're going to push. And just don't sew over and break the tweezers. All right, and I think we've got enough. Yeah, we've got enough traction. And again, you've got a whole lot of bulk in there. We've got 2 layers of fabric, 2 layers of batting, and all of that is coming together with our seam allowances. And this corner I can feel is really kind of thick, so I'm going to take my time there. And this is our last side. And we're going to just kind of back tack. And we are good to go. All right, you'd cut your threads, you'd give this a little bit more of a press, you'd take the time to clean everything up. What I want to do is just cut a couple threads and head back over to the cutting table, and we'll take a look at what we just did. All right, so these are the 2 basically that I just worked on. So you can see this one doesn't have the X stitch along the way, and this one does. Totally up to you. It's just one of those extra stability kinds of things. You can see how this one is just completely clean, and then this one has the stitching at the bottom. So you choose which way it is that you want to do. So for hot stuff here, 100% cotton batting, no scrim. That's what we have here. For cold stuff here, you can use whatever it is you want for your inside. This guy here with the tea candle or the tea light in here, you know, this is just one of those kind of decorative kinds of things. And again, if you've got this stuff here, this will work too. So this, you can see it's a snug fit, but that's perfect for your hotter foods. So the gelatos that we have, the expensive ones, this shape is a little bit different than that. This shape is different, but the beauty of this is this template will let you do all of these things. Again, I cannot wait to see what you all do with this. I know y'all are going to do some great things. I want to see pictures. I want to see the fabric choices that you have, and I want to hear who you've given these to and how much they've enjoyed using them. I think this is going to be so much fun. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in getting this template, winnerdesigns.com. You can find it on my website, and it's the ice cream cozy. Remember, I have the microwave bowl cozy squares. I have the microwave bowl cozy curves. I have the coffee cozy that's over here somewhere. All of those are cozy. So if you search for cozy, you're going to see a bunch of other things. This is the ice cream cozy. It's the one that has the basically an X mark. And again, it's got those markings on the back so you can put your X stitches on there, so it makes it faster, easier. So have a great time. Thanks for watching. Bye.